Chapter 4. Randy, the Sinister Waffle. Ren, who knows where or when. Present day, actually, Ren. Editor. Thank the gods for waterline repairs. Scalding hot. No heaving or tossing her about. Getting gunk and funk off the day. Ren needed to get out of the slump. She had to. This situation was untenable. She leaned gently against the paper-thin divider, thankful the water was back on after the absurdity of the day before. A more exciting day than most. Much of their ship was still damaged. Repair crews roamed the halls, patching what they could. Lanson had already warned the department he would throw some of them on one of their flex repair teams. Scuttlebutt said they had actually moved forward in time, and now were shyly sniffing the balls of a futuristic fleet ship. Assuredly, it was a temporary thing. Assuredly, some future technology would send them back. People were panicking, terrified. Ren should be worried too, but she couldn't muster anything up. That scared her more than the rumors. That lack of emotion, the lack of caring, the lack of curiosity. She merely existed. No purpose. No usefulness. Taking up space. What mattered to the important folk, the efficiency of stats on the AV drive. Staying one step ahead in the Mars Cold War. The rights of the miners overall. What mattered to Ren, the look her former best friend gave her as he body-checked her on the way to the buffet. The disgust as Lanson fumbled basic tradecraft, knowing her own voice wouldn't be welcome. The slightly sick feeling she felt when she passed Denold in the corridor. Feeling small and unloved in that cramped, hot shower. Alone, even though there were people all around, beyond the partition, performing their own ablutions, loudly chattering on, living their own lives. Being alone in a crowd was worse than true solitude. Maybe she didn't realize the extent of her loneliness until after she lost the privilege of an ensuite. It was kinda a solar system's smallest violin thing, but sometimes she really missed living in senior officer quarters. She didn't miss the accompanying senior officer, though. She didn't. In times past, she still had. How messed up was that? Missing that colossal, preening peacock? When she convinced herself love was unconditional, she twisted herself into painful Gordian knots of stupidity to maintain high ground. Once, not long ago, she was Karenna Yilmaz Riley, and she thought she loved a man who just didn't know how to love her back. Thankfully, with so many systems down, at least the processor that turned tasteless proteins into manageable chow still worked. Do you know any more about what happened? She asked her table mate. About us moving forward in time? Is that even possible? Where are we? Or rather, when? The guy leaned forward. Our computer analyzed the positions of the stars, and the bosses now think we're all the way in Baumgarten, decades ahead into the future. 6 decades or so. Her eyes widened. No shit? No shit, he confirmed. Actually, one of them got really weird when Commander Lanson mentioned you. He was giving them names for a future repair crew. God damn it. Of course Lanson put her on a repair crew. Anyway, seemed like they recognized your name. Very funny. Eastman, her companion, slurped his algae noodles with a squelching sound that put Ren's teeth on edge. Not joking. Holy dusty balls, you got a nephew or something that grows up to be important? Ren looked up at the familiar voice. Sadiq Kanan, former bestie, slid his tray across from hers. The aforementioned former best friend had directed that statement at Eastman, giving Ren only a cool glance before he began to eat. That familiar feeling of smallness flared briefly before she pushed it down, shoving her hands in her seat briefly to avoid betraying herself with shaking hands and bitten fingernails. No nephew, she said, shaking her head. No siblings. I don't have much family. Sadiq had already lost interest. So, are we going home? He ran a nervous hand through his wiry black hair. Eastman shrugged, practicing his smug look. I'm not worried. He did, in fact, look worried. This is surreal, Sadiq responded. He frowned. As long as I'm not working with fertilizer when we suddenly spin up to go home, Ren said, trying to lighten the subject. I smelled like the ass end of a bovine. Eastman grimaced in sympathy, his freckled face briefly flushing. Sadiq gave her a look of distaste, but it meant so much more. Wren had gotten used to identifying every one of Donald's moods, cataloging each emotion running across his face, an early warning system to prevent earthquakes. She was now doing it with Sadiq. He hates you, her mental critic said. The therapist on board had told her to name her critic, so she could understand her brain was lying to itself. So she named the voice Randy. It didn't help. Wren still had a sinister twat Waffle whispering sweet nothings in her ear. But now he just happened to have a name. What'd you do? Sadiq asked. Piss off Riley again? In the olden days, Wren would have replied in the affirmative, and he would have commiserated. But this time, Sadiq had asked in a bored tone. Whether that meant, I'm sick of you complaining about him, or, really, Wren, you bring it upon yourself, she wasn't sure. After Donald and Wren married, he had begun a campaign to improve her career prospects. On a long-range ship, one's career and personal life intertwined. When someone hung with the wrong crowd, it affected their reputation and chances of promotion. Or that's how Donald had explained it to her. Given he, the XO, was in charge of personnel and promotions, she had reluctantly taken advice and had tried to distance herself from her closest friends. Her superficial relationships were still intact, like with Eastman. But Sadiq was different. Wren stopped leaning on her best friend for things, and she stopped being there for him in moments big and small. There was never a big falling out, Sadiq and Wren. They devolved. Sadiq resented Wren for pulling away, and eventually Wren resented him for giving up on her. Of all the things she hated Donald for, this small, insignificant, in the scheme of the universe thing might have been the one she hated him for the most. She finished the rest of her meal in silence and headed off to her shift. The orders sent to Wren's codex decreed she was working with a team from the other ship, which offset her annoyance at Lanson's directive, because maybe she could probe and figure out who these guys were for herself. Malfunctioning heating and cooling regulation system, it said on her codex. Sounded glamorous. As she walked up, a cable sparked. Great. All she wanted to do was turn in for the afternoon, but duty called. She looked for the highest ranked person and found a full commander with sandy hair and big jolly cheeks. He and the rest of his team were wearing jumpsuits, which was the informal fleet uniform option. Made sense if they were maintenance or engineering. The uniform didn't look like it was a different style from what she knew, but how many ways could you style a jumpsuit? Sir? The man turned toward her, and then startled. Holy shit. He said this in an almost laconic drawl, in stark contrast with his surprise. Wren blinked. I mean, what can I do for you? He studied her insignia, as if it were unfamiliar. Ensign? Flight officer, actually, sir, she said. Wren Yilmaz. I was sent down to help with the repair team. Her voice had a lilt, mostly out of confusion, because he and his team were looking at her strangely. Right. Flight officer. So, do you have an engineering background? She shook her head. Sorry, sir, I have basic knowledge, of course, but no specialties. He scratched his nose. Well, I don't know then. I can go, sir, she said, probably too quickly. I don't want to get in the way. Maybe she could play hooky for the day. No, 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 he said almost as quickly. Damn. You should stay. He looked at his team, seemingly for support. You good with the spanner? Wren shrugged. Good enough, sir. They were all still looking at her. Okay, well, you're small enough. Why don't you get under there and adjust the junction to the right there to see if it helps the amount of flow conducted through this cable? Right on. She grabbed the spanner and ducked underneath. It was cramped under there. The commander's voice filtered down to her. By the way, he said as she started twisting the junction, apologize for my language earlier. You surprised me, is all. Believe me, sir, Wren grunted with effort, forcing the junction to move. Not a problem. Okay, try that. The commander muttered a few suggestions to his engineers, and then the cable sparked worse. Okay, y'all, he said. Let's actually loosen that a bit, maybe 5 degrees, and hey, Hollis, while she's doing that, how about you shore up those deltas? Not much luck that time either. He had her clamping a few wires next, The team mostly talked amongst themselves, but in low, hushed tones, and she tried to hurry the job, feeling like an interloper. Damn thing doesn't want to adjust to normal, Ren groused, popping her head out from under the console. It's like a fucking ingrown ball hair. Quiet. Then most of them burst out into laughter. The commander looked like someone had socked him in the mouth. A full commander. God damn it. That was inappropriate, sir. It won't happen again. She winced in anticipation. Actually, it's pretty entertaining, the commander said. She exhaled. Thank the fucking life force of all that was good and holy. She couldn't take another goddamn shitstorm of her own making. You folk like swearing redheads, sir? She asked. Mostly, yeah. One of the workers behind him, a hopping exclamation point who had introduced herself as Deidre, nodded emphatically in agreement and then winked at her. She winked, but it was a reassuring wink, like a, I've got you, you're safe here, and what the hells was that, and why was it so comforting? The commander, still quiet and studying her closely, broke out into a huge grin and put out his hand. Foster Grady. They shook. So, where are we? The others shared glances. Sorry, flight officer, Grady finally said. Classified. For now. Captain's orders. Yeah, that basically confirmed the rumors. Anything to do with me? She ventured. Because you acted like you knew me. Grady opened his mouth, then closed it. Classified, he responded again. Sorry, really, but... He ran his hand through his hair. By all the ancient deities, this has all been as impossible and weird as a cat wearing a tea cozy, but in other news, looks like we're done. He peered at her. It might be good for you to stop asking so many questions. I mean, he clarified. Trust your leadership and stuff. It'll be okay. Yeah, Ren muttered, rolling her eyes. Guy seemed nice, but he was like all the others. She shoved her tools back into her kit. Nice meeting you, and all. She didn't bother saying goodbye. A jaunt to the future. That tug. The repair team looking at her like a large pink dildo had just sprouted out of her head. It all added up to something. But what?